Hi, compliance professional. Welcome back to CorpBuzzz. In my previous sessions, I have covered the SEBI LODR 2015 and its recent amendment that is applicable to the listed entity during the year. And those who have not watched the video, I would really recommend you to watch the SEBI LODR 2015 if you are working in a listed entity. That will really help you to know in a crux how this whole quarterly, half yearly, yearly compliance is complied. If you remember that up to 45 years experience needed to publish price sensitive information. The baseline of it, even if you are not working in a listed entity, right? But right, and if you remember, those who have watched the video, that the first compliances that I talked about the quarter near to the quarter end was regarding the closure of the trading window, right? And of course, simultaneously freezing the pan of the designated person at depository level. In furtherance to this compliances, there is a separate SEBI regulation, that is SEBI PIT regulation 2015, that a listed entity has to comply during the year. So if you are working in a company who is planning to go for an IPO, right, or working in a listed entity and are curious to know how this whole regulation needs to be complied, what are the restrictions, what are the insider, who all are the designated persons, right, as a role of a compliance professional, everything I'll sum up in a very simple language, no jargon use. Here is a tip. Stick with me till the end of this video and you will definitely know how this regulation works during the year. In fact, you can advise the designated person and the insider when they can trade the shares of the company, when they cannot, and also helps the compliance professional, or if yourself is a compliance professional, then you can stay out of this SEBI naughty list. And of course, I'll be sharing the practical tips, the legal implications, of course, not illegal ones, but hit the like button if you're ready to learn. Stay tuned. So, if you have seen my pattern, rather than jumping straight to the compliances, I would rather first tell what are the applicability of the SEBI PIT regulation is. So, if you see that SEBI Prohibition of the Insider Trading regulation is applicable, one, on a listed entity, second, company proposed to be listed, third, mutual fund, fourth, intermediary and fiduciary. Also, it is also applicable on the transmission of share. However, they are exempt from the provision of the trading window closure, pre-clearance, contra trade. All these jargons would be explained later in the slide, but the norm relating to the disclosure requirement shall be applicable on the transmission of shares. And to for a easy reference, the company secretary working in a company proposed to be listed, let me tell you that the entry in SGD software, right, is applicable from the filing of the RHP, that is offer document, and the freezing of PAN that we talked about SEBI LODR 2015 is applicable from the first day of the second quarter from the quarter in which the company gets listed. So this is the basic applicability of the SEBI PIT regulation 2015. And before getting into the implications, right, and the compliances around this regulation, the CS or the compliance professional working for the first time under this regulation, let me help you with the three main terminology that has been used during the act, and the people who know can skip this introduction and move to the relevant section that is needed for you as per the timestamps given in my description. So the first terminology that I want to make you well aware is known as the insider. So who all are the insider? Insider means connected person, including the deemed connected person. And if I want to make you more deep dive into it, then connected person means any person who is or has been associated with the company directly or indirectly during the 6 months prior to the concerned insider act, or anyone in possession of or having access to unpublished price sensitive information. The baseline of it, even if you are not working in a listed entity, right, but even if you have a connect with the person who might have the price sensitive information, right, and based on that information you have traded the shares of that company, even you would be considered as a connected person. Whether you are a legal counsel, you are a merchant banker, a policeman, anyone. So baseline, if you read out the regulation, then the baseline is any person, right? And the second terminology that I want to introduce is regarding the designated person. So designated person is defined as per the two criteria, that is, one is function, second is seniority. Function ka example I can give you: the secretarial department team have access to the various confidential paper before becoming available to the public. So anyone working in the secretarial department would be considered as a DP. And if not function, then it comes also as a seniority. So SEBI has defined the first two layer of the organizational ladder are presumed to have an access to the UPSI. And if you ask me whether the SEBI has defined the proper definition of designated person, so then the designated person means the employee of a listed company, intermediary or fiduciary, and material subsidiary, right? Promoter of the company, promoter who are individual or investment company or intermediary or fiduciary. CEO employs two level below CEO of the company, intermediary, fiduciary, and material subsidiary, support staff system, right, of the company. So here if you see, तो आपका सीईओ आएगा, सीईओ के दो लेवल बिलो के लोग would considered as a DP, which would definitely include the KMP and SMP if you go by logic, right? If you see the material subsidiary, then वो जो threshold आप देखोगे सेबी में 10% of the consolidated turnover, तो वैसी अगर आपकी कोई मटेरियल सब्सिडरी है तो उनके एम्प्लॉयज के टू लेवल बिलो तक आप जाओगे, राइट? सपोर्ट स्टाफ सिस्टम आईटी का कौन पर्सन जो एग्जैक्टली वो एचडीडी टूल में आगे जो बात करूँगा, सो जो आईटी पर्सन वो हैंडल करेगा उनका भी नाम आएगा, प्लस पूरा सेक्रेटरी डिपार्टमेंट का नाम आएगा। फिड्यूशरी और इंटरमीडियरी का मतलब आपको क्या होगा? फिड्यूशरी आपका अकाउंटिंग फर्म, लीगल फर्म, ये जो भी आपको एडवाइस कर रहे रहेंगे, एंड इफ दे आर इन्वॉल्व इन एनी ऑफ द ट्रांजेक्शन दैट इज द प्राइस सेंसिटिव, उनका भी नाम आएगा डीपी लिस्ट में। So, if you are well, that one is insider, another is a designated person. And if you are well averse, now let us deep dive into what is UPSI, right? So, UPSI means, first, to understand the term UPSI, it is important to know the other side of the interpretation, that what constitutes as a generally available information. SEBI has defined it as an accessible to the public on a non-discriminated and shall include unverified event or information reported in print or electronic media. And if I have to give an example, what is accessible to the public on a non-discriminatory basis, that is, information published on the website of stock exchange would ordinarily be considered as generally available. So if I have to give in an example, then if a CEO of a public traded company is hospitalized and appears to a near to the passing by, and within a few days the CEO passes away in the hospital or public establishment, this information would be considered as UPSI because public may have access to the news and because the company is listed, therefore trackable. In contrast, if the CEO pass away in the meeting room and the shares are sold by those in attendance before the news breaks, that information would be considered as UPSI, right? So that UPSI, it depends very case to case basis, right? SEBI has not given the proper list of UPSI, but yes, they have given the illustrative list that what could constitute as UPSI. So if you could see, the UPSI means all these informations. And if you see that in change in capital structure would not include the change in ESOP, like capital due to the ESOP exercise. And the green highlights are the recent amendment what SEBI has come up with to include those into the UPSI definition. And the company secretary working in a listed entity and are well averse with the schedule 3 and regulation 30. If you could see the differentiating factor, here the SMPs are not included, wherein in schedule 3 the SMPs are also included. So for example, fraud default by KMP, here only KMP is included, right? So these are the three main term to understand who all are the insider, the designated person, and the UPSI. So all the conceptual provision that is applicable on the insider, the designated person, has been covered later in this video. My main focus of creating this whole video was helping the company secretary who are appointed in a company proposed to be a listed and going for a listing, plus post listing what all are the compliances that needs to be covered. So let us start with that, right? So if you see that near to the listing, in consultation with the merchant bankers and the legal counsel, company would adopt the following policies, right? The code of conduct for regulating, the code of practices, policy for the inquiry in case of leak and suspect. Then the second step that as a company secretary you need to make sure is to identify who would like give you the service of the SDD, that is structurally digital database system, and make sure it is not outsourced and properly backed up in the system. Once the SDD vendor is finalized, then in consultation with CHRO, that is Chief Human Resource Officer, you need to prepare the list of the DP and who all are the DP. I have covered in the introduction part that who constitute as a designated person, right? And of course, and also identify the personals of the fiduciary intermediary to update the same in the SDD software. Once DPR identify, so there are two routes, right? One, either you take all the information from DP or you decentralize the whole system. This is for my experience. What I do is ki, whatever I use in the system, I make sure that once the DP list is uploaded, their login credentials are created so that you create a pressure on the designated person to make sure that the information that is required as per the act that I'll cover in the later. So for example, your लाइक इमीडिएट रिलेटिव का डिटेल हो गया, आपका प्रीवियस एम्प्लॉयमेंट्स हो गया, एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशंस आपने कहाँ से पढ़ाई की है, वो सब का जो होता है ना, वो आपको मेक श्योर करना पड़ेगा कि आप एक डीपी से वो सब इंफॉर्मेशन लो. So you can choose whatever way suits your company, right? So once it is done, then before filing RHP, you need to initiate the confidentiality notice email to all DPs, identify and restrict them to share UPSI with anyone. So this is one of the thing you need to make sure. Then any pre-IPO allotment would be considered as a UPSI. Therefore, entries needs to be done in SDD if done before RHP and prospectus. Right? Make sure you cover this pre-IPO placement. Right? Next, to closely monitor any developments from the RHP stage till listing that may be considered as UPSA, and to make sure the same is entered in SGD software. Once the listing approval is received from the stock exchange, this information practically required to be recorded in the SGD as UPSI along with the name of the person who are in possession or have access to this information. Most importantly, post listing, it must be ensured that the designated persons and their immediate relative, including employees who have subscribed to the shares under employee reservation quota, do not sell their shares within 6 months from the date of allotment so as to avoid any violation and subsequent penalty on account of contracted. सो इफ़ यू सी दैट जब आप लिस्टिंग के पास आते हो, आपने पॉलिसीज़ अडॉप्ट की, आपने एसडीडी वेंडर ढूंढा, आपने डीपी लिस्ट बनाया, इंटरमीडियरी फिड्यूशरी का नाम लिखा, आपने उनको मेल भेजा कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी नोटिस का कि आपने यूपीएस है प्लीज़ मत शेयर करना. अगर आर एच पी प्रोस्पेक्टस एनी प्री आई पी ओ जो कंपनी प्लेस करती है, वो इन्फॉर्मेशन के बारे में जिसके पास भी वो एक्सेस है उनका अपने नाम एच डी 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 में डाला, राइट? उसको डालने के बाद क्या इंटेंशन होता है कि आप कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी नोटिस भेज सको कि भाई इस किसी को मत बताना. वंस दिस इज डन, आप फिर लिस्टिंग के पास आते हो, राइट? लिस्टिंग का सबसे मेन एक एलओडीआर का क्राइटेरिया बताता हूँ. इफ़ यू रिमेंबर दैट आपको 45 डेज या 60 डेज मिलता है, राइट, फ्रॉम द क्वार्टर एंड और द ईयर एंड. तो इसमें एक और प्रोविजन है कि पोस्ट लिस्टिंग अगर आपको 45 डेज और 21 डेज फ्रॉम द लिस्टिंग, सो 45 डेज फ्रॉम द एंड ऑफ क्वार्टर एंड 21 डेज फ्रॉम द लिस्टिंग विच एवर इज लेटर, आपको फाइनेंशियल पब्लिश करना पड़ता है. अगर आप वो कंसिडर करो, देन पोस्ट लिस्टिंग के बाद पहले तो आपके ट्रेडिंग अप्रूवल जब आएगा वो भी आपको एक यूपीएसआई बन जाए, तभी भी आप एसडीटी में सॉफ्टवेयर में डालोगे ना. जब आप लिस्ट हो जाते हो ना, तब आप क्लोजर और ट्रेडिंग विंडो भी इंटीमेट करते हो, राइट? देन फिर आप सब मेल्स वेल्स भेजोगे एंड वो कब तक खुलेगा? 48 आवर्स आफ्टर द पब्लिकेशन ऑफ द रिजल्ट. एंड जैसे मैंने एक इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ कही है कि मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट, डीपीज, all the employees who have hold the shares right, of the company who have like applied in the employee reservation, tell them strictly not to trade, not to in fact, sell the shares, right, of the company within 6 months, to as to avoid the penalty. So this is the most important like insight that I wanted to bring up here on this platform. एंड इफ यू रिमेंबर LODR में मैंने एक और कवर किया था, वेरी नाइस सेड कि अगर आपका कंपनी SGD कंप्लाइंट नहीं रहेगा तब आपको हर क्वार्टर में आपको सर्टिफिकेट देना पड़ेगा टू स्टॉक एक्सचेंज, राइट, एंड इफ इट इज SGD कंप्लाइंट दैट साल में एक बार देना पड़ता है. So you have to interrelate the SEBI LODR की compliances that is related to this like SEBI PIT regulation and this SEBI PIT का कैसे understanding हो रहा है. I hope you are getting the like understanding. The another side that I want to cover here is regarding the key practical insight that judicial precedent that I want to cover. So, a spouse is by default considered as connected and potentially an insider under SEBI insider trading regime, regardless of financial independence or whether any trading advice is communicated by the insider, unless the presumption to access to UPSI successfully reputed in enforcement proceeding. Prohibiting the portfolio manager to trade in the security of the company at his own discretion or when the insider is in the possession of UPI. Despite the above, if any trading is done by the portfolio manager, it would be treated as a trading done by the insider, and therefore the insider would be held liable. So make sure you intimate your portfolio manager, even in case of mutual fund, to restrict of investing any fund which covers your own company. So these are the very two important like the judicial proceeding has come up with. Next, if you have a ESOP like scheme in place in your company, right? So for easy reference, let me tell you that the grant of ESOP per se is not trading and accordingly can be made during the trading window closure. ESOP holder can exercise shares during the closure of trading window, and any ESOP holder can pledge or sell upon exercise of ESOP post opening of trading window, of course. So no contrary restriction is applicable. And based on the combined interpretation of the act and judicial precedent, the primary emphasis is on the possession of UPSI rather than the intent or the purpose behind the transaction. Accordingly, any insider who is in the possession of UPSI is required to refrain from trading in the securities of the company. Now that I have covered the applicability, the key terms that are used Pura Act में, right, the whole practical insight and the legal tips that I could have like shared with you on this platform. Now let us jump on the conceptual provision plus some informal guidance that has given by the SEBI in the act. So, what is insider trading? So, insider trading is the act of subscribing, buying, selling, dealing, redeeming, switching, or agreeing to subscribe, buy, sell, deal, redeem, or switch in securities by an insider based on the UPSA. Different region use different term with most using material non-public information. And if I have to sum up the informal guidance by the SEBI, then trading also includes share dealt by SLB mechanism, exercise of warrant shall be deemed as acquisition of shares, creation, invocation, revocation of shares, trading in right entitlement tantamount to open market. And what are the prohibition and communication on the insider by this act? So no insider shall communicate, provide, or allow access to UPSI related to a company or securities listed or proposed to be listed to any person including other insider, and also no person shall procure from or cause the communication by any insider of UPSI except where the communication is in the furtherance of the legitimate purpose, performance of duty, and discharge of legal obligation. And as I talked about, the policy that a board of director would adopt near to the listing would definitely cover the definition of legitimate purpose. So, except that if you have the UPSI, don't share it with someone, right? And also don't allow anyone to procure that UPSI from you. This is the most important restriction on the insider. And even if any person in the receipt of UPSI pursuant to legitimate purpose, right? Even if you receive that UPSI furtherance to your legal obligation, you would be considered as an insider. Therefore, the compliance professional and the company secretary should make sure the confidentiality notice should be sent to them, right? No insider shall trade in the security that are listed or proposed to be on a stock exchange when possession of UPSA. And if you read the act, then regulation 3.3 allows sharing of lawful UPSI, which would entitle in an obligation to make an open offer in a trading regulation, or if the board of director thinks in the best interest of the company. So आप legitimate पर्पस के लिए शेयर कर सकते हो, बट उसके अलावा आप शेयर नहीं कर सकते हो, राइट? कोई ऐसा लग रहा है कि एक हाँ कोई पोटेंशियल इन्वेस्टर्स है जिनको हमें कंपनी के बारे में बताना पड़ेगा सो दैट दे कैन इन्वेस्ट इन द कंपनी, make sure their name are like registered in SDD and the confidentiality notice are being sent to them, right? And कल को उठ के अगर कोई इंसाइडर ने trade कर लिया, are there any defenses available in the act? So yes. So first defense is the off-market inter-se or block deal transaction between insider or relevant persons are allowed only in absence of UPSI, and where UPSI is possessed, such transaction shall not violate Regulation 3, subsection 3 of the Act. Right. For example, if certain information about the company which is in the nature of UPSI is shared with a potential investor so as to like which is permitted under Regulation 3.3 of Act, the concerned investor should not trade in the security company unless the shared information is generally available to the company. So this is the first defense. Second would be the statutory or regulatory obligation to carry out bona fide transaction. Third would be transaction was done as per the trading plan. And fourth would be the exercise of ESOP. So these are the defense, but you can't decide कि हाँ ये अगर मैंने कर लिया तो मैं जीत गया. So it depends all case to case, but these are the defense that SEBI has given in the act. So if you have understood that what all are the restrictions applicable on the insider, let us jump. What are the restrictions and the surveillance on the designated person as a whole? As I said earlier that जब आप DP list बनाते हो तो आप make sure करोगे the DP shall be required to disclose the name PAN of any document for himself, his immediate relative, person with whom DP shares a material financial relationship on an annual basis. And material financial relationship, any person who is in the receipt of any kind of payment such as loan, gift from DP equivalent to 25% of the annual income of DP of preceding 12 months, but shall exclude relationship which is like the payment is based on the arm length transaction. And I remember I was reading one case law wherein like उसमें क्या हो गया था कि एक like father अपनी डॉटर का पैसा नहीं किसी कोई क्या था, हाँ, सो फादर अपने कजिन के बेटे का पैसा एक एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशन में पे कर रहा था. So whether they would be that cousins or those child would be considered as a material financial relationship, because ये केस में पैसा डायरेक्टली वो बच्चे के पास नहीं जा रहा है बट एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशन के लिए जा रहा है. So as far as I remember, that was considered as a material financial relationship. So आपको ये सब मेक श्योर करना पड़ेगा, आप डीपी से ये सब इंफॉर्मेशन लो. सेकेंड वुड बी दैट इन एडिशन टू दिस नेम एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशन वो सब आपको लेना पड़ता है. थर्ड is the DP and the immediate relative shall not trade during the closure of the trading window and when having UPSI. As I said and intimated earlier कि near to the quarter end DP का अन इमीडिएट रिलेटिव जो एक नया अमेंडमेंट आया है उनका जो पैन है आपको डिपॉजिटरी लेवल पे फ्रीज करवाना पड़ता है, राइट? सो मेक श्योर कि आप कंपनी के स्टॉक्स ट्रेड ही नहीं कर सकते. एंड किस किस को ट्रेडिंग विंडो एप्लीकेबल नहीं होता है. सो द डिफरेंसेस एज आई डिस्कस अर्लियर फॉर द इनसाइडर, उनको ट्रेडिंग विंडो एप्लीकेबल नहीं होता है. अगर आपने प्लेज ऑफ शेयर्स किया फॉर अ बोनाफाइड पर्पस सब्जेक्ट टू द प्री क्लियरेंस, देन ट्रेडिंग विंडो एप्लीकेबल नहीं होगा. Acquisition by conversion of warrants or debentures, subscribing to the right issue, further public issue, preferential allotment, trading of shares in a buyback, open offer, delisting, or such other transaction. वो उसको सब ट्रेडिंग विंडो एप्लीकेशन ऑफर फॉर सेल राइट एंटाइटलमेंट सब्सक्रिप्शन टू द इशू ऑफ नॉन कन्वर्टेबल सिक्योरिटीज। सो उनको ट्रेडिंग विंडो एप्लीकेबल नहीं होता है। सो अगर आपने एक क्रक्स में समझाओ तो आपका जब क्वार्टर जब खत्म होने आता है, क्वार्टर मतलब जनवरी फरवरी मार्च, तो अगर आपका मार्च खत्म होने को आ रहा है, सो 1 अप्रैल से लेके जब तक आपके बोर्ड मीटिंग में फाइनेंशियल्स अप्रूव नहीं होंगे उसके 48 आवर्स तक ये क्लोजर और ट्रेडिंग विंडो होता है। सो इसमें डीपी और इमीडिएट रिलेटेड तो ट्रेड नहीं कर सकते। अब अगर ड्यूरिंग द ईयर उनके पास यूपीएस है तो वो ट्रेड नहीं कर सकते। बट इवन इफ अ कंप्लायंस ऑफिसर थिंक्स कि ये डीपी ट्रेड कर सकता है तो वो एक नॉशनल ट्रेडिंग विंडो भी रख सकता है फॉर स्पेसिफिक डीपी नॉट टू ट्रेड देयर शेयर्स। बट ये फ्रीजिंग ऑफ पैन इज ओनली डन एट अ क्वार्टर लेवल, राइट। आप ये नॉशनल पे इसका पैन फ्रीज नहीं कर पाओगे। So these are the things that needs to be taken. Next would be upon reopening of trading window, if the trade crosses the threshold set by the board as per the policy, then वो ट्रेड आपको प्री क्लियरेंस लेना पड़ेगा। सो मतलब कि आपको क्लोजर और ट्रेडिंग विंडो में आप कर नहीं सकते। जब आपका ओपनिंग होगा, अगर समझ लो आपके पॉलिसी में लिखा है कि 5 लाख के ऊपर अगर मुझे प्री क्लियरेंस लेना पड़ेगा, तो अगर आप 5 लाख के ऊपर का ट्रेड कर रहे हो कुछ कंपनीज के सिक्योरिटी में तो आपको प्री क्लियरेंस लेना पड़ेगा। सो दिस आर द restrictions and surveillance on the DP. Next, the most important is कि which in any event shall not be less 6 months, wherein the DP and the immediate relative who is permitted to trade shall not execute a contra trade. Right? What is contra trade? In a simple language, the opposite transaction. That if you buy, you cannot sell. If you sold, you cannot buy. Right? सो ये आपको 6 महीने के अंदर कुछ नहीं करना है, तो आपको मेक श्योर करना पड़ेगा कि ये सब complied हो। And if I have to sum up all the informal guidance that I've been studied during the case laws, then following are the provisions. First, the restriction or contract is applicable on the PAN of an individual, irrespective of the capacity is holding. For example, एक प्रमोटर है, प्रमोटर का एच भी है, प्रमोटर का एक फर्म भी है। सो प्रमोटर के पैन फ्रीज होगा तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो एच भी क्लोज होगा और उसका फर्म भी क्लोज होगा। सो इसके लिए वो लिखा गया है। ठीक है। सेकेंड, any derivative contract that is cash settled on expiry shall not be considered as a contract. However, closing the contract before the expiry would mean taking contract position, right? So इसका मतलब क्या होता है कि अगर जो डेरिवेटिव में करता रहेगा, राइट, सो उनको पता होगा कि एट द एक्सपायरी अपने आप सेटल हो जाता है। सो अगर दे हैव नॉट टेकन एनी पोजिशंस बिफोर द एक्सपायरी, देन दैट वुड बी कंसिडर्ड एज अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ट्रेड। बट अगर उसके एक्सपायरी के पहले आपने अगर सेल कर दिया और आपने निकाल लिया पैसा, तो दैट वुड बी कंसिडर्ड एज अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ट्रेड। Shares allotted to the conversion of the warrant securities acquired dispose of pursuant to right issue, FPO, buyback offer, open offers, bonus, OFS, share splits, merger, acquisition, contra trade would be applicable. एंड बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग एक केस लॉ बताता हूँ कि जिसमें प्रमोटर ने अपने इंटर से प्रमोटर को ट्रांसफ़र किया, राइट, एंड प्रमोटर ने देन अपने ही एक ट्रस्ट को ट्रांसफ़र किया। तो इसमें आइडियली जो पर्सन है वो सेम ही है, बट इसको भी कॉन्ट्राक्टेड माना गया। सो मेक श्योर करो कि आप प्रमोटर दूसरे प्रमोटर को, मतलब प्रमोटर को अगर समझ लो एक्सरसाइज ऑफ वारंट पे शेयर्स मिल गया तो वो दूसरे प्रमोटर को ट्रांसफ़र नहीं कर सकता। और अगर उसने ट्रांसफ़र कर लिया तो उसके 6 महीने के बाद ही वो ट्रस्ट में डाल पाएगा। सो ये बहुत छोटी छोटी माइन्यूट कॉम्प्लिकेशंस है जो आपको मेक श्योर करना पड़ेगा एज अ कंपनी सेक्रेटरी यू कंप्लाई। नेक्स्ट वुड बी, जैसे कह चुका, एनी ग्रांट ऑफ ESOP पर्सेज नॉट ट्रेडिंग अकॉर्डिंगली कैन बी मेड ड्यूरिंग द ट्रेडिंग ऑफ क्लोजर, और ESOP होल्डर कैन सेल प्लेज अपॉन द एक्सरसाइज ऑफ ऑप्शन, राइट। And if you see that DP shall disclose to the company number of security acquired or disposed within 2 trading days of such a transaction if the value of security traded, whether in one transaction or a series of transactions over any calendar quarter, aggregates to the traded value in excess of 10 lakhs or such or other value as may be prescribed, राइट। सो अगर ड्यूरिंग द कैलेंडर क्वार्टर अगर एक डीपी ने 10 लाख के ऊपर का ट्रेड किया है, राइट, सो उसको इंटीमेट करना पड़ेगा कंपनी को एंड ये ऑटोमेटिकली आपको पता चल जाता है इवन इफ दे डोंट डिस्क्लोज, बिकॉज वंस यू स्टार्ट यूजिंग एसडीडी आपको पता चलेगा, आपको हर फ्राइडे मंडे बेन पोस्ट डालना पड़ता है टू मेक श्योर टू ट्रैक की एवरी वीक उसका होल्डिंग कितना है, ठीक है। एंड अगर समझ लो गिफ्ट के फॉर्म में हुआ तब आप क्या लिखोगे, क्योंकि तब तो पैसा इन्वॉल्व ही नहीं है, तो आप तब क्या बोलोगे कि 10 लाख कब होगा। सो गिफ्ट के केस में सेबी ने ये कहा है वो प्रिवेलेंट मार्केट वैल्यू को समझा जाएगा एंड उसके बेसिस पे आपको डिटरमाइन करेगा। सो दिस आर द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट रिस्ट्रिक्शंस implication that needs to be taken care of in case of DP, right? Apart from this, जैसे हमने बात किया है कंप्लाइंसेस की, कम्युनिकेशन और रिस्ट्रिक्शन इनसाइडर पे क्या है, डीपी पे क्या है, इसके अलावा एक्ट में और भी कंप्लाइंसेस है। सो द फर्स्ट कंप्लाइंसेस इज रिगार्डिंग as per regulation 6 and 7, that is general disclosure, that disclosure trade would be not only those executed by the person concerned but also by the immediate relative and of other person for whom the person concerned takes the trading decision। और जब भी कोई अपॉइंट होता है, चाहे वो केएमपी हो, डायरेक्टर हो या प्रमोटर प्रमोटर ग्रुप हो, उसको अपना डिस्क्लोज करना पड़ेगा, राइट, होल्डिंग एज अ डेट ऑफ अपॉइंटमेंट में विद इन 7 days ऑफ सच अपॉइंटमेंट। एंड पहले भी कह चुका हूँ, कंटिन्यूअल डिस्क्लोजर होता है कि अगर आप एवरी कैलेंडर क्वार्टर में 10 लाख से ऊपर का कर रहे हो तो आपको वो बताना पड़ेगा। अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट अगर आप देखो तो एज पर रेगुलेशन 9A of SEBI BID 2015, the CFO, sorry, the CEO, managing director, or such other person of a listed entity intermediate of shall put in place adequate effective system of internal control to ensure compliances with the requirement given in this regulation to prevent insider trading, right? The audit committee of a listed entity shall review the compliance with the provision of this regulation at least once in a financial year and verify that the system for internal control are adequate and operating effectively. So this is one of the agenda that would become at every commencement of the financial year, right? Another, apart from the code of conduct and fair disclosure, जैसे मैंने कहा है आपको, every company shall formulate a written policy and procedure for inquiry, ये मैंने पहले भी कवर कर लिया। So these are the compliances. I know it's heavy, बट आप जैसे जैसे काम करना स्टार्ट करोगे, आप इसको बार बार देखोगे तो आपको समझेगा कि क्या रिस्ट्रिक्शन इंसाइडर के लिए, क्या डीपी के लिए, क्या जनरल कंप्लाइंसेस है जो आपको कंप्लाई करने पड़ते हैं ड्यूरिंग द ईयर। नाउ लेट अस कम टू द लास्ट लेग that not many compliance professional would cover in their seminars, webinars, right, about the trading plan, right? But let me tell you, this is one of the thing that a compliance professional should think, right? So whether the trading plan is good or bad, you yourself evaluate after knowing it. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this trading plan? So advantages means the facilitate compliance trading for insider who might be in the perpetual possession of UPSI, flexibility for long-term financial planning as against restriction during trading window in a year, approved trading window provide an affirmative defense against insider trading allegation as trades are executed at a predetermined schedule not based on the real-time UPSI. It also involves price flexibility. No pre-clearance from compliance officer is needed while executing as per the trade plan. Limited disadvantages are once approved, it must be executed. Any deviation has to be reported to the audit committee and compliance officer. Cooling off period before executing the trade as the plan first needs to be submitted to the stock exchange. So if you remember and if you are like stick till the end of the video, you have seen that trading window is not applicable if you're like trading as per the trading plan, right? अगर आपने ट्रेड कर लिया शेयर्स और वो आपके ट्रेडिंग प्लान से, तो आपको एक डिफेंस भी बन जाता है कि कल को उठ के आपके ऊपर एलिगेशंस लगा। सो नाउ व्हाट आर द थिंग्स नीड्स टू बी टेकन केयर ऑफ व्हाइल फॉर्मुलेटिंग द ट्रेडिंग प्लान। सो trading plan shall not entitle commencement of trading on behalf of the insider earlier than 120 days from the public disclosure of the plan. So basically जब आपका ट्रेडिंग प्लान बनता है तो आपको पहले स्टॉक एक्सचेंज को इंटीमेट करना पड़ता है और उसके 120 डेज के बाद ही आप एज पर द स्केड्यूल जो आपने मेंशन किया आप वो ट्रेड कर सकते हो। एंड मेक श्योर इसमें भी कॉन्ट्राटेड नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप बाय सेल कर रहे हो, नहीं। आप मल्टीपल ट्रेडिंग प्लान्स बना सकते हो बट इट शुड नॉट ओवरलैप विद ईच अदर, राइट। एंड दोनों ट्रेडिंग प्लान के बीच में भी अगर वो विद इन 6 मंथ का गैप है तो आप उसको वो नहीं कर सकते, कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट नहीं कर सकते। So, how exactly trading plan should look is not defined in the regulation, but the following parameters for each trade to be inserted in the trading plan. First, either the value of trade to be affected or the number of security to be traded, nature of trade, either specific date of time period not exceeding 5 consecutive trading days. Fourth, which is optional, is the price limit, whether it should be the upper price limit for a buy trade or a lower price limit for a sell trade, subject to the range as specified below. So 20% के आसपास आप लोग उसको प्राइस लिमिट को सेट कर सकते हो। ये जनरली लोग करते नहीं है बिकॉज फिर वो बहुत रिस्ट्रिक्टेड हो जाते हैं। इसके लिए इसको ऑप्शनल रखा है सेबी ने और फर्स्ट 3 को कंपलसरी रखा है। सो वो आपको डिस्क्लोज करना पड़ता है। और आप कोई भी बड़े लिस्टेड एंटिटी का आप ट्रेडिंग प्लान देख सकते हो जो स्टॉक एक्सचेंज पे इंटीमेटेड होता है, राइट। सो ये काफ़ी बड़ी बड़ी कंपनीज इसको यूज करते थे, नॉट एवरी कंपनी वुड लाइक ऑप्ट फॉर दिस रूट। नाउ upon approval of compliance officer, the trading plan shall like is irrevocable and the insider shall mandatorily have to implement the plan without being entitled to either execute any trade in security outside the scope of the trading plan or to deviate from it except due to the permanent incapacity or bankruptcy or operation of law or death. सो ये काफ़ी रिस्ट्रिक्टेड हो जाता है। अगर आपका ट्रेडिंग प्लान वंस अप्रूव्ड हो गया स्टॉक एक्सचेंज पर चले तो आपको इसके अलावा आप और कुछ नहीं कर सकते। इसके लिए लोग इसको ऑप्ट करते नहीं करते, बट अगर ऑप्ट कर भी लिया तो उसके खुद के एक एडवांटेजेस होते हैं। सो यू डिसाइड नाउ वेदर इट इज़ वाइबल फॉर योर ओन कंपनी और नॉट। एंड द लास्ट इज द फाइन मैट्रिक्स। So these are the fines if someone violates the regulation and involves in the insider trading, then these are the fine metrics. Thank you. I hope you like the coverage of the episode, and if you really want to like help me to know what all things I can like amend or work upon, do let me know in the comment section or the link given in the description. Jai Hind.